Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Usher, and this is the World of Higher Education podcast. Canada's heading into some pretty choppy waters in 2025. For a century or so, we've had a one-track economic strategy, closer integration with the United States. Now, the Trump administration, with its faith in tariffs as an instrument of both power and corruption, has essentially nuked that strategy, at least as far as the trading goods is concerned. There's a lot of change coming to Canada, and it'll be costly. In much the same way that diplomatic evolution and defense needs are forcing European countries to look at higher education in a different light, Canadian universities are looking around at their new situation very nervously too. In Canada right now, few people are making the case for change as strongly as John Stackhouse. John's the ex-editor-in-chief of the Globe and Mail, is now a senior vice president at the Royal Bank of Canada, leading that organization's economics and thought leadership. He's the lead author of a recent report called A Smarter Path, the Case for Post-Secondary Reform. This report makes a number of, shall we say, uncomfortable observations about the relationship between Canadian higher education and the Canadian knowledge economy, in particular between high spending and high graduate numbers on the one hand, and low productivity and significant levels of graduate underemployment on the other. Though the report does not directly address the issue of Trump or tariffs, it was released 48 hours before Liberation Day, it has added to the sense in Canada that the higher education sector is headed for, and indeed needs, a shakeup. And just to come clean for a moment, we here at Higher Education Strategy Associates are a partnership with John and RBC and the Business Higher Education Roundtable, putting together a series of events culminating in a policy summit on post-secondary education in late September of this year. In the interview today, I talked to John about what the Canadian system's biggest challenges are, how universities and businesses can more effectively partner with one another, why Canadian political parties are increasingly shy about betting on the knowledge economy. But enough from me. Let's turn it over to John. Okay, John, why does a bank care so much about post-secondary education?
That's a fair question, Alex, and thank you for including us in the podcast here. If I can put it in terms of capital, let me do that because maybe that's what people would expect from a bank. So our economy and the society that depends in many ways on the economy depends on capital. We have natural capital, we have capital, technology capital, we have financial capital, which you'd expect from a bank. But it's critical we also have human capital. That's core to the economy. No, nothing new there, other than to stress from RBC's perspective, when we look at Canada's prospects for out to the 2030s and the prosperity that we're going to need and that we want as a society, we need to think about how we harness all these forms of capital, our natural capital, our financial capital, our technology capital, but critically our human capital to create, to develop a more prosperous economy and society, but also to create the kind of vibrant society that, yes, companies want to be part of, but we as individuals all want to be part of, we want to contribute to. As a bank, that matters. Our purpose is to help clients thrive and communities prosper. Both of those require that human capital. We hear that from our clients. We hear that from our community partners. We hear it from our employees. So those are some of the many reasons we as a bank at RBC are leaning into the post-secondary conversation.
So in the paper that you co-wrote, you described Canada's post-secondary education system as being slow, costly, often out of sync with the economy. I think those are pretty common criticisms of the post-secondary education around the world. Do you think there's something specific to Canada about that? Is there somewhere else you think has it right? Or is this a more general critique of, modern higher education?
And there's probably some parchment from like 1,000 years ago where some education critic says, you're too slow, you're too costly, you're out of touch with the economy.
Yeah.
Signed the monks of higher education. But yeah, it's fair to point out that Canada is not a class of one in these challenges. But maybe a couple of things that we do need to realize are problems more in Canada than elsewhere. One is being a bit of a victim of our success. We have a lot of higher education, of post-secondary education, I should say, in the country, and we haven't differentiated enough. And we haven't differentiated the way others. Europe is the classic example. Continental Europe certainly manages to continue to differentiate. So we're putting people out with degrees and diplomas that are not differentiated enough. We've not allowed the business model to evolve at the speed of the economy and society around us and of the expectations, both of students, but also, I would argue, of teachers and people who are wanting to create the knowledge and share it. They, among others, know that the world is moving faster than many of our institutions are. And then on the research side, which I'm sure we'll get to, wow, we really lag as an advanced economy, as a G7 economy. We're not nearly as good at post-secondary research. And I'm pointing to the private sector here as part of the problem, integrating that with the private sector to the degree that an advanced economy will need to in the 2030s.
So RBC's been a really strong voice on this education work connection. So what are employers still not getting from the current system? And what responsibility do you think the employers themselves have to help improve it?
Yeah, there's a dual responsibility. And thanks for mentioning RBC's commitment to work integrated learning. One of the reasons is our CEO, Dave Mackay, is a product of the co-op system at Waterloo and has a deep conviction that work integrated learning not only improves the kind of life cycle for the student, it improves the education system by students being able to go back into the classroom, having applied some of their knowledge out in the so-called real world. But it also improves organizations. And that's what we see at RBC. We hire a couple of thousand co-op students a year, and they're not just programmers from Waterloo. We have fantastic interns from TMU, from all sorts of colleges and universities across the country. We benefit from that. It improves how we work. It obviously creates a talent pipeline, but one of the things we've seen over the last decade is a breakthrough by giving our co-op students challenges to solve for us. We put them on teams. We give them some management support. And these are people who have never worked in a bank. And we say, here are some of our biggest problems. See you in August. We have like literally a bake-off where they present to upper management their ideas. We've got something like 100 patents out of this system because the critical thinking, the fresh minds, the collaborative spirit that students actually develop in college and university, in post-secondary, they learn how to work together on teams better than we could teach them out of the gates, and they can apply that to some of our problems. So we're benefiting from it. So what do employers need to do? They need to see this as a really powerful investment in their own businesses. They need to see it as a way of injecting a bit of change into their organizations. And they need to understand that this all requires an investment, as I mentioned. So you've got to hire people who are good at managing this. Students just don't walk in the door and do this on their own. It's not Lord of the Flies. It needs that kind of organizational investment.
So, but let's talk about what education institutions are doing, because I certainly got the impression reading the report that you think they need to do more to align educational outputs with labor market needs. I mean, they've done a lot over the last decade. You've got a big growth in work integrated learning. You're seeing the rise of micro-credentials, experiments, and things like competency-based learning. But I get the impression you don't think that's enough. What more needs to happen?
Yeah, well, sadly, or depending on your point of view, it can be exciting as well. None of us are doing enough because of technology, but also because of some other global forces. The world around us is changing faster than probably most of us are changing. That includes large organizations, small companies, but also educational institutions. So the pace of change is accelerating and will continue to accelerate. Therefore, institutions need to be much more change-minded in what they do, and that's hard in an educational institution for all the reasons that your listeners would know well. So what do they need to do? Changing and adapting the business model is a big challenge because it is now into crisis territory where post-secondary institutions are not getting the funding that they need. They know that. I think everyone knows that, but they are losing the argument in the public square for new funding. And given all the pressures on society, I can't imagine that changing favorably for them in a significant enough way. So they need to be freed up to change their business models, including their revenue models, and that will require being more adapted to and adaptive to the economy, broad-based economy around them, and get into some of the opportunities there.
John, we've been talking so far mostly about human capital, which I know you said is your main concern, I guess, as a bank, as an institution. But what about research and the co-production of knowledge, right? Like, what are the respective roles of post-secondary institutions and businesses here? And why don't we see the kind of close connection between business and enterprises and universities the way we do, say, in certain parts of Europe and in the United States? What's the missing link here? Why can't we get there?
What a thick, difficult nut to crack, and people who are way smarter than me have studied this and shared thinking on it for decades. The challenge lies as much in the private sector as anywhere else, and we've become, in some ways, too much of a branch plant economy and a hinterland economy, both at the same time and separately. That where we're able to live off the wealth of the land, quite literally, we're able to live off the wealth of access to the U.S. market, and we're able to live off the dividends of an innovation economy. All that, I don't want to say is coming to the end. That would be a bit hysterical, but is well into a sharp change in direction. And the Trump challenge to Canada, in an odd way, is a bit of a gift to force us to say, okay, we need to be less dependent on the U.S. That's probably a very strongly felt Canadian view now, and connect more with other parts of the world. Great, lots of opportunities there, but business is going to have to invest more in R&D if we want to turn those branch plants into more independent facilities that serve Canada at an efficient way, but can also sell into seriously competitive European and Asian markets, and adding the cost of distance to that. We are going to need to invest in and apply R&D in a way that we haven't probably in well over a generation. So new governments, intentionally plural there because it's federal and provincial, need to almost in an emergency way get business together and say, what do we need to create that? It's not just one-off tax breaks. It's creating a culture and a dynamism between universities particularly, but universities and colleges, and as well as polytechniques, to work with business to develop a kind of post-Trump Canadian economy, and not do that in a statist way. So that this is among the challenges. And also not to think we can copy the Fraunhofer model from Germany or the Japanese model, because those are very particular to their cultures. So what can we develop that will be particular to the Canadian culture? But this is not the time for a Royal Commission or a 1 or 2 year study. This will need to be done with a fair bit of urgency. And I'd hope a new federal government would kind of see that opportunity to bring the provinces, but also the private sector together with a bit of a crisis mindset.
Okay, I'm going to come back to the Trump issue in a second here, but going back to the report, you outline a number of challenges in the sector, right? Outdated budget model, over-credentialed but underskilled graduates, and so on. What do you think is the most pressing reform that Canadian post-secondary needs to deal with right now? What's the weakest link in the system?
That's a great question, and it's hard to pick one. I'll go back to the funding model that post-secondary institutions need to be liberated in different ways to innovate with funding models, to wean themselves from the strictures of provincial funding, as an example, to develop various approaches to tuition and fees, as another example, that are much more based on performance and outputs as well as outcomes, and to have more competition between parts of the sector. Most people I know in the sector are pretty enthusiastic for that. They probably want it set up so they have a good chance of winning in that model. But I think the provinces need to be nudged, and they probably don't need a lot of nudging to open up the doors to more innovation, more competition, and a little more daring on the institutional side.
So that's, I think the words you used in the report were reasonable deregulation. Tell me about the increased competition. Like, are there things we could do to incentivize more new players in the system that might be more disruptive?
Yeah, there's nothing like new players, and I've studied enough sectors in terms of innovation over the years to see this, that nothing quite works quite like the power of a vibrant, well-funded new player. So encouraging that will probably cover a number of miles in the journey, and will allow creative players across the sector to come up with ideas probably that they're not even thinking of now. It's just the power of competition. So creating or reducing regulatory barriers to that as an example. I think on the employer side and on the business side, we can also think harder about sending the right market signals. And that can be something as basic as hiring. So we tend to hire, it's convenient, and there's lots of reasons for it, from the same institutions, and like tends to hire like. So how do we as employers send signals that maybe a new entrant is going to have a good pathway to employment for their students and their graduates, because that will quickly be heard right down to the high school levels when students are making decisions.
So outside the ambit of this report, you've been very outspoken the last couple of months about the gravity of the threat that Canada faces from the U.S. under Trump. You spoke at that Business Higher Education Roundtable event, and I know people who listened to your speech were actually quite sobered by it. There are big changes coming to the country as a whole. What are the implications for universities? Like, what changes do you think are now baked into the system of government subsidies and government regulation because of the new geopolitical situation?
So it's unfortunate that colleges and universities are not more at the forefront of the I'll call it the Trump discussion. We're hearing lots about pipelines, about export infrastructure, ports. Great. Well, I mean, those are all critical. We hear lots about our trade exposed sectors, autos, most of all, but steel and aluminum, lumber, even pharmaceuticals. Well, guess what? All of those require post-secondary institutions and are dependent on post-secondary institutions. So how are we thinking about the steel plant of the future that may be exporting more to Europe or Asia? It's going to need a number of incentives to retool, perhaps, or one could say the same of auto plants that may have to focus on manufacturing different kinds of products, including possibly defense products, as we look to increase defense spending. What kind of talent, if I can put it that way, are they going to need to do that? How are the schools in those regions adapting to that? But back to the research question, how can the research side of those schools be integrated more? You'll need to come up with new models, and let's incent them or incentivize them to do that. The good news is, I suspect there's going to be a lot more money on the table for that, but it's going to be kind of a different research funding and different institutional funding than perhaps we've seen before. That would be good if it's different. How do colleges and universities step up to that plate where there could be tens of billions of dollars available for economic transition, and to step up and play a leading role in that, and they'll be rewarded. They'll be rewarded for that. We're seeing, interestingly, an enthusiasm and excitement to attract academic talent from the U.S., the sort of so-called Trump intellectual refugees. Yeah. All right, we've both seen kind of cycles or variations of this over the years. I remember after 9/11 and during the Bush years, not quite like now, but there was the same sort of excitement, and you had star academics move here as almost cultural votes on Canada. That's tends not to be sustainable or even that interesting from a long-term perspective. So how do we make it sustainable and interesting to create, and this is someone else's idea, the Canada research chairs of the late 2020s that can attract that talent, not as a play to say, hey, you can escape the Trump crackdown, but rather say to the world, if you are an entrepreneurial, ambitious academic in fields that are important to Canada, there's no better place in the world to be right now than Canada. That's a great kind of message I think we can send to the world.
Yeah. I think one of the things you're touching on there, though, at the start of that answer, was that all political parties seem to be responding to a set of aggressive tariffs on the export of goods by doubling down on producing goods, right? It's like, and I find this sort of weird. Like, surely one of the answers is we should pivot to services, because that's where we're not very good at services. And that, in theory, I think, that's where universities in particular would have, in theory, some kind of strength. Why do you think we're pushing so hard on goods and letting the services side drift a bit?
That's such a great observation, because we've become services, but more maybe stated a different way, an intangibles economy, a knowledge economy, right, which was a very welcome thing to say a decade ago, and then it sort of became more derided. We need both. You can't. Well, you can, but the best intangibles tend to come out of some sort of tangibles activity. Sure. And we need to play to our strengths, and that includes a resource economy. Back to what Canadian universities are missing in our study, I find it interesting that post-secondary does not map the resource economy of the country as well as it should. And this doesn't mean we just need to produce kind of miners and rig operators, although that's going to be important for a number of years. But there's all sorts of science and discovery, which we've been great at for generations, that we need to amp up if we're going to be a critical minerals leader in the world. It's not just about having critical minerals mines and processing plants. We've shut down a lot of our best mining schools in the country, and China has like a multiple number of great mining schools far beyond their population size that we have and should have. So we need to invest in the intangible side, the knowledge side of that tangibles part. It's not just manufacturing, as you say, but it's processing, it's resource extraction. That's actually incredibly sophisticated. It's given Canada kind of a slew of academic recognitions over the decades. But we need to ensure that intangibles capacity that we're developing in our universities and colleges, as important as it is also tied to that so-called real economy, but certainly manufacturing and resource development.
Best case scenario, 10 years from now, what does the Canadian post-secondary system look like? How is it different from today?
It has far more variation In fact, something new may be come out of this that is neither a college nor university nor polytechnic. That becomes a bit of a Canadian model, just as we became sort of a pioneer of community colleges in the 50s and 60s. We have a chance to create a different echelon, and that doesn't mean necessarily at the expense of the others, but that is more appropriate. We have institutions that map that economy, including the far north of the country, and we don't need to be geographically everywhere. We can do these things remotely as well, but we need to ensure that our institutions are better reflective of the country and its economy, and that it is better connected with the world. You and I've talked lots about the sad story of international students in the country. And the real tragedy of what's been done over the last 10 years with international students would be if we abandon it altogether. We have something that's largely good. It got mucked up, and we need to kind of address that mucking up. But we also need to be a place that students, the best students and most ambitious students from around the world, want to come and study, preferably to stay, but also to go back and connect us with the world. Because what we're saying to ourselves as Canadians now, we're not saying it this clearly, but it is that we want to be a more global country.
Yeah.
And here's our opportunity through our post-secondary system to continue to be a more global country, but that's going to require us to reach out to the world. And there's no sector that does that better than post-secondary.
John, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Alex. I've enjoyed it.
And it just remains for me to thank our excellent producers, Tiffany McLennan, Sam Pufek, and you, our viewers, listeners, and readers, for following us. If you have any questions or concerns about today's episode or suggestions for future ones, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us at podcast@higheredstrategy.com. Run, don't walk to our YouTube page and hit subscribe. That way you'll never miss an episode of the World of Higher Education podcast. Join us next week when our guest will be Romulo Pinheiro. He's a professor at the University of Agder in Norway, and we'll be talking about universities' role in the economic development strategies of rural and remote regions. Bye for now.